Hi, it's Matt again with State of Flux to review the legendary Snyder Cut. And I'm going to be kind of upfront with this. I look disheveled. I am talking probably not so hot because I have not slept. I watched this at 2 a.m. when it dropped and had severe thoughts. So, time to hit you with my thoughts, but first, a tiny bit of backstory before I start reviewing the Snyder Cut, which is full transparency, I'm not a huge fan of Zack Snyder. I think his best film is the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, the owl movie. I'm not a fan of his comic book adaptations. 300, I just did not speak to me on any level besides style. Watchmen, I think, is a gross misinterpretation of that book. If you are reading that book and you think Rorschach is the hero, you should probably give that book another go. I think you're missing the point of that book. Man of Steel takes this great character, instilled with hope, and greywashes it and gives you a hopeless movie. And then Batman vs. Superman's kind of the weird one out, because that's the only movie that I would recommend. It's not a particularly good Superman movie or a particularly good Batman movie, but as an individual film, separating yourself from the comics lore, that movie kind of worked. Ben Affleck killed it in that film. I think he is in some ways the best screen Batman that we have seen. Definitely not in the best Batman movie, but he's my go-to for Batman in my head now. And Superman, Henry Cavill is a lovely Superman. If you're going to replace Christopher Reeve, you do so with Henry Cavill. Excellent casting all the way around. Then 2017 hit, and Justice League came out, and I liked it. The movie is a hodgepodge. It's a mess of two conflicting filmmakers with conflicting ideologies, and that's apparent when you watch the film. And I'd say like is kind of a strong word. The movie is 100% passable. And it did one thing that was super important to me. It fixed Superman. It gave us the Superman that Henry Cavill always should have been. The movie had color, it had vibrancy. It just didn't have a particularly compelling story or a good reason for these characters to really unite. There's plenty of flaws with Justice League, as it's now being called, some of which I will touch on. But now we have the Snyder Cut, a movement made by fandom. And this is a redemption song in a lot of ways for Zack Snyder. Unfortunately, I vehemently hated this film. Absolutely just cannot express how much I disliked this film. If you like Zack Snyder, if you like his aesthetic, which I think his movies are gorgeous across the board, there are frames of every one of his films that I would like to put on canvas and hang in my house. Like, he is that good of a visionary visual storyteller. He just doesn't understand the storytelling aspect beyond the vision. And this film is just like those. Gorgeous film, across the board. There's not a poorly rendered conceptual shot. There's some poorly rendered visual effects, but that's not here nor there. The biggest problem with this movie is his consistency across the different comic book adaptations to misinterpret characters. And there's some pretty bad ones. These characters are aspirational figures in this film that they will do acts of extreme violence or extreme pettiness, and a second later the film tells you that what they just did is a heroic trait that you should aspire to do and perform as well. And that is a problem. That is where this film really just died for me. And I understand why a studio would look at that and say, hey, there's some questionable material here. What message are we sending to the audience that's going to be watching this? This movie's rated R for no reason other than to do it. There is a ton of digital blood, and that was added in post. Like, there's nary any blood that's like not digital in the film. There's 3 F-bombs, one of which is earned by Cyborg. The other 2 just are there. They don't need to be there. Especially there's like a terrorist character that says it for no reason, and then Ben Affleck says it at the end. On top of that, the mischaracterization really kills a lot of the momentum this film has. It does have a couple of monumental moments, and maybe one of those is kind of earned. The one thing this film really does better than the theatrical cut is nail the character of Cyborg. At least the presentation of Cyborg that we get in this. He's not necessarily comics accurate, but I can see why Ray Fisher was really fighting for that character, because the stuff that was lifted out of the movie lifted most of his material, and it's some of the best stuff in the film. Some of the most emotionally earned moments in the film are Cyborg moments. A lot of these I'll touch on later. But needless to say, this film is 4 hours long. The previous film is 2 hours long. Neither film is particularly different from one another. The 2-hour cut of Justice League, which is mostly this film, there's only probably like 3 or 4 major scenes that are reshot. One between Lois Lane and Martha. And then the other ones are scenes between Batman and Wonder Woman, or a group collective of the characters discussing what they should do with Superman, as well as the intro of The Flash is a little different. Plus the regrettable Russian family thing that I was not a fan of in the theatrical cut. Otherwise, everything else in this movie is Snyder's stuff. The humor comes out of the Snyder stuff. It's not Whedon's, which kind of surprised me. I kind of expected a lot of the humor that was in that first cut to be Whedon's. Some of it is, a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is right from this. So the people that were like, this movie's too funny, bah! That was always the intent. However, there's so much somberness around it that you maybe would not have noticed it, especially in its 4-hour runtime. But what I liken this to most is this Snyder Cut isn't so much a Snyder Cut of the movie, it's just an extended cut of the 2-hour movie that you already have at hand. It's not unlike the Lord of the Rings extended cuts, but I feel like that is selling this film, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to amend that and say this is like the extended cuts of the Hobbit films. Those movies, which are already over long, had extended cuts. And outside of An Unexpected Journey, the other 2 extended cuts actually damage greatly the original feature, which wasn't particularly great to begin with. It just made them longer, more laborious to get through. And in the case of the Battle of the Five Armies, added a bunch of digital blood to give it that hard R rating for no reason other than to just do it. And that's exactly how I felt about this film. As I was watching it about an hour in, I sensed that what I was seeing was just each scene from the original theatrical cut extended by 2 minutes front and back of each scene. So you're not getting a single movie, you're getting basically 2 movies that's just one movie super long. It's hard to explain how similar this film is. But yeah, it hobbited me, and I was not looking forward to be hobbited today. When Snyder kept saying he had a different vision, I expected the film to feel different, and it really didn't outside of the way the characters are portrayed. And I think between the 2 films, the Justice League cut captures the characters more screen accurate from their comic book counterparts. And I'm talking Superman, it obviously fixed. Wonder Woman has a couple of moments in the Snyder Cut that are just genuinely regrettable, and this the Justice Cut takes that away from it. Batman's kind of the consistent through line between both films. The Snyder Cut edges out with Cyborg in some lovely moments, and Flash is pretty consistent between both, however has a more dramatic conclusion in the Snyder version, but it's really not that different at the end of the day. The also screen accurate Steppenwolf, a lot of people didn't like the look of Steppenwolf, and I agree. In the first theatrical run, he did look a bit video gamey. However, if you open up a comic book with Steppenwolf, that's what he looks like. He doesn't look like this razor sharp dude that looks like he has staples like flowering out of him. That's Zack Snyder nonsense, and we don't need any more of that. Or at least I don't. But this film was not made for me. This film was made for the fans. So this film, even though it doesn't speak to me, will probably speak to them and give them this thing that they've mythologized in their head to such great levels. And I really hope they like it, and I think a lot of them will. But yeah, I'm going to give Justice League, the Zack Snyder Cut, or Zack Snyder's Justice League is I think what it's credited as, a 1.5 out of 4 stars. This is only better than Suicide Squad, and not anywhere near as good as any of the other films in the DCEU, including like Joker and stuff like that. Like none of them. This comes nowhere near the quality of even the second worst movie after Suicide Squad. This doesn't compare. There was nothing that really spoke to me too much about this film. Now, here is where I'm going to get into spoilers, because about 20 minutes into this film, I started having like severe thoughts about what I was watching, and I grabbed a notepad and I started making notes. So I'm going to go through them point by point, because I really need to get into the minutia of why I didn't like this movie. So here's page 1. Let's just travel back a couple of pages, and there we go. So, spoiler warning ahead. This is going to be me spoiling the shit out of the Snyder Cut from here on out. The movie opens with Superman, just like the theatrical cut. There's a difference, though. Each film opens with Superman. That's how we're introduced to this character in this film. In the theatrical cut, we're introduced to the camera footage taken by the kids with unfortunate Lip situation. That scene outside of Lip is fantastic. It's Superman explaining the S on his chest. Hope bends like a river. And hope is like your car keys, easy to lose, but always there if you look for it. I love that. That's great sentiment. This movie opens with Superman dying, just savagely, from the end of Batman vs. Superman. And his death calls to the mother boxes that are out there. The mother boxes are the MacGuffins they were searching for in the previous incarnation of Justice League, and is also the main MacGuffin of this film. Somehow his death triggers the mother box's activation to call to the skies of the evil, the bad guys. And never explained, not once. Like, Superman's only been on the Earth for 30 years, less than. And there's a whole lot of time between that when they were being held captive and there was no Kryptonian, no Lantern, or whatever they say in the movie. So I don't know why they weren't activated before that, or before even like Wonder Woman was on like human land. But whatever, I digress. It's a thing, you go with it, you see how the mother boxes are activated and how it interacts with the various characters. Skip ahead a little bit. There's a scene. This is the scene that broke me, that caused me to grab said notebook. Wonder Woman has her introduction identical to the previous film, where she's on top of that statue, and then there's terrorists, and they're shooting a machine gun, and she like bats them away with her little wristbands, and deflects all the bullets. And then she goes a step further in this cut, and she uses on this human terrorist her God-killer power and disintegrates him, just obliterates him off the fucking planet. And then turns to the crowd as if she didn't just slaughter a terrorist, which I feel like is not necessarily the right look for Wonder Woman. And there's a girl who's on the ground, like all the people are like, oh, thank you, and there's a younger girl that's looking a little more cautious about it. So Wonder Woman goes up to her and is like, what's wrong, princess? And the girl is like, I want to be like you someday. And she says back to her, you can be anything. And that's what I'm talking about. That is the exact moment that ruined this film, because it demonstrates his misinterpretation of character. Wonder Woman prior to this, if you're only looking at the 2017 timeline, what had the Wonder Woman movie come out that year, where the core message of that film is love is the way to win. She fuels everything with love. Cut to this film, in her introduction, God kills a man and then tells a girl who's looking at her as if she's a heroic figure, and tells her that she can do anything after she just slaughtered a person. And this girl is saying, I want to be like you. That is problematic. That is a child talking to the audience, to other children who may be watching this. Granted, it's rated R, probably was never going to get an R rating theatrically. And saying that this was an aspirational quality. And I don't believe that of Wonder Woman in general. Hell, Wonder Woman 1984 resolved everything through the power of her words and not through violence, to the complaint of thousands of fanboys that there wasn't enough action except for when she fought a kitty cat. Alright, moving on. A little while later, so we have an introduction with Bruce Wayne and Aquaman, yada yada. There's a scene where Aquaman, it's in the theatrical cut too, saves a fisherman, slams him up onto a countertop at this bar, and says he didn't trust the ocean. He's got to watch his waters, and he takes this bottle, and he slugs it back, and he's like, he'll pay for it. And then he leaves, and then he goes walking on a dock as the repeated refrain is, there is a king. Again, suggesting that what he just did is a kingly duty, an aspirational quality that you as an audience member should have. This is a heroic man to you. However, why? Why is that? He was just being an asshole to that guy that he saved. And granted, that's kind of in character, but we don't know that yet. And that's not from the comics. That's unique to this story. And it's regrettable. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of CG blood. It doesn't look good. The pass the baton scene is here. It's just stretched out much longer. A lot more parademons going on, followed by a scene with Vulko. Aquaman and Vulko talk, and it feels just like an ad for Aquaman's movie. It doesn't feel like it belongs in this film. It's not doing groundwork to set up his character arc in this film. It's doing groundwork to set up his character arc in a whole other movie. The big complaint about Batman vs. Superman, and the one positive that Man of Steel had, is Man of Steel was a self-contained film. It wasn't concerned with world building, whereas Batman vs. Superman was all about world building, to the detriment of the film. There's a 3-hour cut of that movie. You could distill that movie down to 2 hours and be fine. This movie, I would argue that 2 hours is probably too short, that the Justice League went way too far. But you could distill this movie down to a good 2 hours, 45 minutes. By lifting scenes like this. The Vulko scene, completely unnecessary. Then we get a flashback scene, much like in the theatrical cut. In the theatrical cut, we're seeing a flashback of Steppenwolf and all of his big bad fighting multiple armies and stuff. In this, we see its dark side. And there's a problem with that. First of all, I laugh out loud when I saw digital Ares that put David Thewlis's face on the most muscular human being I've ever seen in my life. And that I could not help but laugh out loud. Then is the problem. Steppenwolf, when we're shown that in the very first theatrical cut, is seen as fighting these 3 armies, is carried away by his people when he's on the brink of defeat. He's carried away with the promise that he will return someday for those mother boxes. In this cut, Steppenwolf is the pawn. The character that is the big bad is Darkseid, and Darkseid is fighting the Amazonians. He's fighting the gods. He's fighting the Atlanteans. Yada yada. He ends up getting into a fight with Ares, and Ares takes an axe and cleaves him just right in the neck. Just cuts him right there, and he's just gushing blood everywhere. And then he gets rescued, and the ship flies away. The reason that's problematic is we're meant to think Steppenwolf is a very scary bad guy, but his boss has been defeated by a character that Wonder Woman in her solo movie defeated, taking away any kind of arch quality that Darkseid has. Complete misstep. They should have kept that as Steppenwolf. That was, I feel like, just an unnecessary means to get Darkseid in the movie earlier. The Barry Allen intro with Iris West was weird. So yeah, that's how we're introduced to Barry Allen in this film, about an hour in, mind you. And there's like a car crash, and it stops, and he rescues her and sets her down, but as she's flying through the air, there's a hot dog flying next to her, and he grabs it, doesn't eat it, pockets that baby for a little joke later, but it was weird and inexcusable. His introduction in the theatrical cut, way better. They just slam cut to the father and a little bit of action beforehand where they kind of establish his character's sense of humor as being like feisty little dude. Plays better in the theatrical cut. So this movie has a prologue, an epilogue, and 6 acts in between. The third act is the first act where I see an improvement over the theatrical cut. And it came with 2 scenes. The first was a scene between Batman and Wonder Woman about recruiting Aquaman. The he said no scene. Pretty funny. I enjoyed that. That was probably the best laughable moment early on in the film. Then there's a football scene that establishes the character's backstory on a minute level of Cyborg. We'll get more later. But that really worked. Worked super well. That's followed up with a scene that I didn't like. And it's weird. The 2 scenes I hated most from the theatrical cut of Justice League, I assumed were reshoot stuff. It was Aquaman talking with Batman very early in the film and just calling him Batman in front of other people. I know there's Icelandic and they speak a different language, but Batman is a universal name, so they're probably going to pick that up. And Bruce Wayne is a world-renowned figure, so hey, that guy's probably Batman, is my guess. I didn't like that was just bandied about willy-nilly. Then the scene in question here that I'm talking about is the scene where the Flash is looking up at the bat signal. And he's like, "Hey, there's your sign! Oh, your sign!" That thing, I thought that those were both from the Justice League. Now, those are both intact in this film as they were. So the jokes are dopey here too, folks. Completely untouched. So Aquaman rescuing Mira did not play for me in this film. F that. I hate it when you have a damsel in distress who needs to be saved by this heroic figure. It plays better in the theatrical cut because Aquaman and Mira are the two having a conversation when Steppenwolf comes to acquire the second mother box. In this cut, Aquaman's not there. She's there. Steppenwolf shows up. They have a melee. He's about to crush her, and then Aquaman comes and catches his fist. Cause whoa, masculine bullshit. Hate it. Get that out of my movie. But keep it in yours. It's the Snyder Cut. The Atlantean mother box scene is lame compared to the epicness of the Amazonian one, and this is a case of diminishing returns. Each mother box becomes less impressive to acquire. Juxtapose that with the acquisition of the Infinity Stones. I guess this would have played better because that would have been before Infinity War, but it's just like the third one's just captured so ignominiously. So it was in that scene with the Atlanteans, where I was like, why don't the Amazons and the Atlanteans go after the mother boxes? Like, they send their rogue scouts to go get them. They send Wonder Woman, who's disassociated from Themyscira, and they send Aquaman, who's disassociated from Atlantis, to get him. You'd think they'd send the people who were guarding the damn mother boxes. That's a problem with both cuts. Some things you can't fix. Most things they didn't. The Nightcrawler that Batman drives is kind of like a spider. It's a little off-brand. I thought that when I saw the first time around. I noticed it again here. Thought I'd mention it. The stair scene that happens during the first battle with the whole crew versus Steppenwolf necessitates the save one moment. So you have these characters on the stairs fleeing for their lives, and the Flash is just running back and forth between them, saying like, go, what are we doing, go. He's like playing jokes. You watch that scene and you're like, you're a superhero. Why are you not saving these people? You could be helping them out. So after watching that, it totally makes sense that they gave Flash a moment, and that moment may have been a little dopey with his like, I push people and then run away. That's not in this film. That's the Justice shit. But the Batman coaching him, saying, save one. Like, I know you're scared, but save one. Then you'll know what to do. And then he's the one that gets everybody out. Besides Cyborg pulling his dad out, nobody is helped along in this. They're just expected to fend for themselves. Another, like, crushing ideological blow from Snyder that manifested in Man of Steel carries through the rest. Cyborg's backstory in the Mother Box is so good. The way that they tell that story on film is just fascinating to me. They go into his brain, and then you see like Ray Fisher, all Ray Fisher-y without the cyborg stuff, and he's telling it and stuff. And tells the story of how he was dead but was revived through the Mother Box. That's where they get the idea to bring back Superman for the resurrection, and everybody's on board and everything. Yeah, everybody's on board in this. That seems messed up to me. You killed this character, the most pivotal character of the two previous movies, at the end of the second one. And everybody is presented with the idea that, hey, we can bring him back, and everybody's like, yeah, we should do that. Let's go. And then they go, and they do it. There's no drama there. That's just, killing him then is just manufactured drama to prolong his return. I liked, in the Justice League, having Batman vehemently want to do that, Cyborg thinking he can do it, that it's possible, and the other characters saying no, and the running joke with Pet Sematary kind of works, because it creates drama that, hey, maybe we don't know what we're getting when we get Superman back. So that was kind of just weird. Aquaman and Wonder Woman have a great moment in the graveyard. They share very few moments together, and I thought that was a very fine one. That was one of my favorite moments of the movie. Batman and Alfred have a scene shortly after that's quite good. And then, during the resurrection, Cyborg is like touching the Mother Box and gets a premonition, another nightmare. This time an injustice nightmare. This happens in the middle of the resurrection. So the film has given you only momentum that Superman is awesome, Superman is great, we need Superman, Superman can save the day. And then, in the middle, they just cleave the movie to a stop so that he can have this vision where Superman's maybe not such a good guy. And then completely ignore it, go back in right where you left off to the rest of the resurrection scene, as if like, alright, we need to get this. It's completely superfluous scene, but it also is like damning to the whole story you're trying to tell of the necessity of Superman. Then evil Superman manifests just like he did in the theatrical cut. It's not changed almost at all until a specific moment I'll get to in a second, but this is what I'm talking about. It makes more sense in the theatrical cut when they present the idea that he might come back wrong, so that when he does come back wrong, the audience is like, oh shit. Because if I hadn't seen that, if they hadn't presented that, it seems weird that this character that's good, that they've never presented any other way outside of in Batman's hallucination, suddenly just comes back a villain. For a brief moment, only to then just snap off and be good guy again. In the middle of this fight, that plays out almost exactly the same, he attacks the military. Superman just uses his laser vision and just plows through the military personnel, completely dismantling everything that Man of Steel tried to accomplish, where finally the military is on his side. They understand that he is a good alien, a force for good, and he's on their side. This happens, he's resurrected, and first thing he does is like plow through the military. Batman shows up. His moment seems more earned in the theatrical cut. I'm bringing the big guns, and the big guns ends up being Lois Lane. In this, Batman shows up literally, I think, with a gun. I can't remember right now because of exhaustion. He starts like battling. He gets batted into a car, and then Lois Lane just shows up from off the street, being like, "My love, you're back." And then he's like, "You're right, we're off." Silius's death is kind of purposeless. That was the acquisition of the third mother box. And this is where it didn't need to be there. He didn't have to die. He could have aimed that laser at the mother box, heating it up without a self-sacrifice. They wanted a self-sacrifice to give Cyborg a dramatic moment and closure at the end of the film. However, it seems kind of unnecessary. In the scenes right before that, where they try to resurrect Superman and Silius is like helping them but kind of preventing them at first, getting in the way. If you lift that, you shave 20 minutes off the runtime. And I think this is what happened to Cyborg, because when you lift that out of the film, Cyborg has much less purpose. You can't really make the ending work. You don't want to just kill him just to kill him like this movie did, where it is definitely not earned, in my opinion anyway. So Cyborg is just kind of there. And it's from lifting these moments that they did a disservice to that character. I fully understand why Ray Fisher was fighting to keep that stuff. But at the same time, I see from a runtime perspective, you have a 4-hour cut of a movie where you need to use existing content and you only have a month to reshoot. Probably not even a month, just a couple of weeks. You need to use what you've got, and you can make the movie much tighter by just, like, Steppenwolf just grabs the mother box and goes away. It does virtually nothing to have Silius die. The two fathers talking to Superman scene in his head, Jor-El and Jonathan Kent, through voiceover, they reprise the actors, is a beautiful moment. Superman taking flight. Don't like the black suit, never have, not in the comics, not in this film. Doesn't matter. That moment is wonderful. The music soars. The music in the film, by and large, is fantastic. Excellent score. The Batmobile, it was nice to see. It has a lot more presence at the climax of this film. Sure does love using those guns for a guy that had his parents mowed down by them. Steppenwolf, in this climax, it kind of hit me that in the theatrical cut, Steppenwolf kind of plays to the audience how we expected Thanos to be. Thanos in Guardians of the Galaxy and in the two Avengers early films wasn't much of a presence. He was CGI bad guy. I bad because bad. And Thanos that we eventually got is very different. Steppenwolf in this is a minion to a higher being of bad guy. He's Ronan the Accuser, getting back to that Guardians. He's not an interesting villain. He's just trying to redeem a past wrong and use this power to appease himself and others. So this movie never had a compelling villain. Is what it boils down to. Flash plays better in the finale of this film. They whip away the Russian family, and Flash is trying to speed run, and it's more dramatic and it plays better in this film. His use is much better. Superman's arrival in the finale of this, in the finale, the fight is good. It's very Zack Snyder, him getting like cleaved, but he stops it because he's muscle, and he's like, not impressed. My feelings towards this film. That said, I prefer the theatrical. It's a cheesy line, but he's Superman, and he embraces those cheesy lines. The truth. I certainly am a fan of truth, but I also believe in justice. Pow. I like that moment. The end scene with the Flash the Runberry scene is just excellent. Super, super well done. That was my favorite Flash stuff in this film. It's not quite as good as what you got in the first season of the TV show and in his Runberry moment in the finale, but it's quite good. Victor's vision is kind of cool, but a bit Infinity War-y. When he's separating the mother boxes, he goes into them and is separating his three family and stuff like that. It's exactly like when Thanos snaps. This movie would have had the benefit of coming out before Infinity War, and so Infinity War would have been the one that felt redundant, but I digress. And then so the movie ends with the characters just slaughtering the fuck out of Steppenwolf, and Wonder Woman just straight up beheads him. This is a woman whose entire identity is built on the concept of love. Cuts the fuck out of that guy's head, and then sends him to the bad guys. That did not play for me. Again, total mishandling of most of these characters. Cyborg's end in this film is good. It feels earned. It's the only emotionally satisfying moment that we get in this entire film.